And I want to welcome everybody for coming today and spending your time with us and seeing the results of the barn grant study that we had done through the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation. Before I continue, I also want to thank the Historical Society for having us here today. One of the things the grant made possible for us was to do a feasibility study for the farm and also a condition study. And without this, we cannot go any further for applying for grants or doing things like this, and this has made it possible. So we went, they said, you would never get this grant. Too many farms, barns have applied for this grant. They all want part of the money, and your barn looks good, you won't get it. And that got me mad. And I called Jennifer, and Jennifer and I put together the grant, and we got it. And then from there, we had to get Roy Gilly of Gilly Designs. It was all these barns got it, but there wasn't any people to do the architecture for it. And so the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation recommended Roy Gilly of Gilly Design in Bristol. And I called him, and he said nobody else had called him, and he came up with all these great ideas. First of all, I want, he said, to do a vision statement, to get the family together and do a vision statement. So I'm going to have Jennifer come up and read the vision statement and then turn it over to Roy.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. We appreciate having you here. Nancy and I have gone on quite a journey, and we've been very busy doing this past year, and I really appreciate everything that Roy has helped us with as well. He's been remarkable, and I know more about barns in New England than I ever thought I wanted to know. My big interest has been to see my family's barn stand and have my children see it stand, and my children's children, and my children's children's. So hopefully we'll see it stand for a long time. I didn't go into to agriculture. To be honest with you, I don't like weeding. I went into nursing. I'm a nurse midwife, so I help grow babies, and babies need to eat, and I need to help my families I take care of to eat well and to be healthy, and farming is a huge part of that. So I'd like to see it maintained in my community, and I have a strong following of patients that very much would like to see the same thing. So I know over the years, patients have come to know that my family is the one that farms in Vernon, and that's the last farm here, and they've asked me time and time again, what's going to happen to that? Is that going to be a farm? And I'd like to tell them yes, but I don't think it's going to be without a lot of community support, so I'm glad to see everybody here. We put together a vision for the Strong Farm as a family, and I'm going to read that to you. Primarily, the Strong family wants the legacy of our grandfathers and great-grandfathers to perpetuate and be preserved for future generations of both our family and the community, which the farm has touched in so many different ways over the past 130 years. We want to preserve the history of the farm while seeing it become centered on the education and recreation of children and adults. We'd like the young and old to participate in creative ways in the many diverse facets of early agriculture and basic farm life, establishing a link between the past and present. In becoming a nonprofit organization, the Strong family desires to preserve the farming history and to promote its use as an easily accessible place where the public can learn about and become involved in revitalizing urban agriculture. We foresee a future of community-based food systems in cooperation with various Town of Vernon's organizations and schools. We also would like to refer anyone else to, there's a nice article about the project that we've done on the Town of Vernon website, so feel free to take a copy of this on the way out and look at that link as well. There is a copy also on the board in the back. So I guess without further ado, I'll introduce our main speaker today, and that's Roy Gilly. Roy, would you like to step up?
My name is Roy Gilly. I'm an architect in Bristol, but I'm also the state chairman for preservation. We call it Historic Resources for American Institute of Architects Connecticut chapter, and I've been there for 25, 27 years, something like that. I lose track. Yeah, right. I seem to have a lot of those long-term commitments. It's amazing. But it's nice to be back in Vernon. I used to be a resident here years ago. And I have spent the years between 10 and 21 years old working on farms every summer on the coast of Maine, so farming's not very far from my heritage. Here in Connecticut, you all know that farming is on the decline, and there are only certain areas in which farming is still being carried on, and it's for that reason that there are a number of state programs, first off buying and development rights for farmland and farmland preservation issues. There's also been a study done by the Connecticut Trust of the status of farms and barns and so on here in Connecticut. And then last year, they decided to actually fund a grant program specifically for barns. Now this is similar to the HIPTAG grants that they've had for a number of years. HIPTAG means Historic Preservation Technical Assistance Grant. Historic Preservation Technical Assistance Grant. The barn program is simply an expansion of that program. And what it was intended to do was to help families, small groups, individuals who had barns that ought to be saved, that had some value from an historic and architectural standpoint, come to grips with how to deal with those particular buildings. Do you preserve them? Do you restore them? Do you put additions to them? Do you let them fall down? And so on. And we are losing barns very, very rapidly in Connecticut because agricultural uses are declining. Alternate uses for barns are also declining. You can only get just so many cars or so many sleighs or so many trucks in a barn, and most people let the barn go. They'll save the house, but they'll let the barn go. So Connecticut Trust said, all of you folks who have barns, we've got some money, we'll hire an architect on your behalf or provide you with architectural services so that you have some way of knowing how to go forward with your particular building. In the case of the Strong Farm, it's kind of interesting. In fact, one of the things that's come out of this program that I don't think any of us expected is that as I go around, and there are other architects going around the countryside, and we're photographing, measuring barns, producing what we call facility surveys, we are incidentally developing a library of different structural systems and different periods on the barns here in Connecticut. So for instance, I've already done 3 barns, we're doing 2 more currently, and I've got 1 more that I've got to do I'm waiting for a little warm weather. But all of the barns that we've looked at are different sizes, different histories, different framing techniques. It's amazing. We are going to wind up here in Connecticut with a library of documentation of barns that really was a freebie in the program. Wasn't intended that way, but that's the way it's working out. Now, some of the barns are already owned by historical societies, and they're using them as exhibit spaces. Some of the barns are actively being used for agricultural purposes. Some of the barns have no use, and people are saying, you know, what good use can I put this to, and how could I get to the point where I can either rent it as a gifty shoppy, you know, that kind of thing, or, you know, what am I going to do with the barn? So the responses we're getting are varied. We just, you know, there are no two alike, and certainly the Strong Barn is not like any other situation that I've run across here in the state, with a slight exception of what's going on. Well, even the other ones aren't the same. They're all slightly different or very, very different. The Strong Barn was one that struck me particularly when I came for the first time and walked into the barn, and I think without any suggestion from Nancy, was struck by how everything was here. It was like walking back in history. All of the stanchions were in place, all of the framing was exposed. Whatever image you ever had of a barn, it was here, complete, and just ready for someone to come in and take a look at. If you had any barn experience at all, you'd know that it was right. The barn is of its period, its framing is intact. For public use, it's going to need some changes, but as it sits right now, it's untouched and perfect. Okay? And I said to myself, and I said to Nancy, my God, we've got to save it, and we've got to let the kids come in and see it, to understand what went on in the barn, why there is a barn, and what we can pass on this heritage to the next generation, or as Jennifer was saying, I don't know, would you do 4 generations, 5 generations, whatever. Okay? So, we've done several things for Nancy that you need to understand. The first issue was what we call a facility survey. It means we go in, we photograph the entire building, we measure the entire building, and then we produce a set of drawings that illustrate the barn as it is today in what we call its found condition. And that's what is up here. Okay? Then we go back a second time, once the drawings are all done, and we inspect the entire building and we put together what's called a capital needs assessment. It's a report in a binder and a second set of drawings that tells you what's wrong with the barn today and what should be done in some kind of prioritized system. In other words, if I were to save the barn today, which repairs are the most important to make? For instance, there's some windows that need some serious attention, there's some framing that needs some serious attention. What's it going to cost? And in a scale of values, what do I have to do this year, next year, 5 years, 10 years down the road? Okay? So that's a capital needs assessment. That was the second task. Then, talking with Nancy and the family and hearing their dreams and what they wanted this barn or this farm to become, we had to look at a third level, a third set of tasks. Jennifer's told you that the vision is to have the barn continue in perpetuity as a nonprofit organization, primarily to allow future generations to understand and appreciate what the agricultural history of Vernon is, or had been at the time that it was active farming. To do that today in any town, not just Vernon, in any town, means that you've got to do a variety of things. One, you've got to get the support of the town government, the Planning and Zoning Board, the town planner, the Wetlands Commission, and all of the various other open space commissions and so on. Not all towns have the same commissions, but there's a similarity through all towns. You also need to find folks who believe in what you're doing and who will be the volunteers and the organizations that will support this operation in the future. So to that end, we've been meeting for what, 6 months now, I guess, periodically with different groups and presenting the idea. That's important because if you're going to set up a museum, in this case essentially we're talking about a museum, you're hoping that it's going to last 100 years, 200 years in the future. That means that folks in town have to buy into your vision, have to agree this is a worthwhile effort. To that end, you need to spread the word. So it means coming to groups like this afternoon, going to some of the evening meetings and so on. And we've done that. This is the last group, I think, at this point that is hearing about this. And in fact, some of you may have heard me before because you were at one other meeting somewhere along the line where we talked about it. Now, going forward from here, I've really done my job. And actually I've done about twice what I'm supposed to do, but whatever. It really is up to everyone in town to take over. Nancy has shared her vision, Jennifer shared the vision of the family, and the question becomes now, where do we go from here? I have suggested they set up a nonprofit, 501c3 tax organization so that people can donate money, donate time, donate vehicles and whatever, and get some tax shelter so that you are not going to fall for employees and so on under some of the rules that would otherwise make it difficult to have a museum. We have established some of the repairs that need to be done, and in fact we've even laid out in preliminary form how that land might be used, because we're talking about the house and a couple of small buildings in the front of the lot, the north end of the lot, the barn, which is fairly extensive, and then there's quite a lot of acreage in the back. So if this is going to be, for instance, an active working farm in the sense that the kids can come in the summer and grow carrots and corn and peas and so on, and actually get out there and weed with their own hands and know what it's like to raise vegetables, then we need some land where that can happen. If there's going to be livestock that the kids can raise and take care of and tend, we need land for the livestock. Now, the site here is also unique. If you think about it, it's got great highway access, both for local citizens as well as people coming up and down on 84. It happens to be adjacent to an elementary school and to the police station And it's an agricultural opportunity from a zoning standpoint. It's a permitted use. Nowadays, almost never do I come to a town where what I'm proposing to build is a permitted use. I'm always fighting for a special permit or some sort of change in the zone. My God, I've got a permitted use here. Okay? So that's a real plus. The barn is in very good shape. It needs some help, but it's not about to fall down. It's going to last quite a long time. The land lends itself easily to providing parking, to providing agricultural areas, garden spaces, as well as livestock, if that's indeed what people decide to do. The cost to start this museum is actually very, very small. The Strong family is donating so much to your effort that there's almost no cost involved in getting started. It's more important to have people volunteer their time, people to get together and plan, people from all aspects of life in Vernon to cooperate and make this a win-win situation. Now, we've met with the agricultural folks. We've got plenty of things to offer them. We've met with, I don't know, I mean, put it this way, every group that we've met with so far has the opportunity to participate with almost no cost and come out of it looking like $1 million. That does not normally happen. Where it goes from here is really up to all of the folks in Vernon. The Preservation Committee is going to assist in getting this thing hopefully researched and established as an historic property in town. Yeah.
I have one. You alluded to the fact that the barn is going to be a museum. It's going to be a preserved
Yeah.
entity. Now, what if she decides to have sheep, and the sheep are gonna, they could be like free-range sheep, they could be out there, or there could be animals that need to make use of this barn. What exactly, how does that all fit in between having it fully functioning and having it being something that's preserved as a museum type thing?
Okay.
It sounds like two different things.
Well, it isn't, but there's a misunderstanding. I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes when I speak, what you're getting on your end of the conversation is not always clear, and so getting feedback helps me make sure that I got my point across. First off, what's being proposed is some kind of a museum. Not a museum probably like when you go to, I don't know, Noah Webster's house and you go through and find out about Noah Webster's life. But a museum more in the sense of a hands-on, full participation, building and grounds whose purpose is really to share and to educate the future generations as to the agricultural history of Vernon, which really is the agricultural history of Connecticut. Now, how that works is going to be partly dependent on the state building code and, unfortunately, state health code, and on the vision that the rest of you put to this, because there are a variety of ways in which this could happen. So, for instance, from a preservation standpoint, one of the issues that I face is, can we find a use for this building which is compatible with its historic use? Well, son of a gun, if I have a barn, I keep it as a barn, and I put some animals in it, and it's always had animals in it because it was a dairy farm, I've just matched the uses without trying, right? However, if I'm going to have school kids come, I'm going to need some bathrooms. I'm going to need a place for them to gather, to get some instruction, perhaps even a couple of refrigerators because they get those little milk containers or little fruit juices, when they come off the bus. They might even have to have a place to put their muddy boots and that sort of stuff. So we've actually come up with a section of the barn that would segregate it off where we'd have heat, toilets, water, the whole 9 yards. So it's easy enough to envision kids coming either from the elementary school or from any of the schools around here, bust in, take off their clothes, get some lunch, let the teacher explain what they're going to see and that sort of thing, and they can actually go through the building. Secondly, the building has old wiring. So I've got an electrical code that I have to work with. My suspicion is I'll leave the old wiring in place so that you can see what the wiring was at that point in time, and we'll do rewiring that hides, that's hidden, so that the new wiring doesn't detract from the historic appearance. Okay? Now, the biggest difficulty that I see in this one, and I'm just not sure what to do with this one, I got part of the barn is full of hay. Hay is flammable. I've got fire codes I have to maintain. Now, the good news is I've got egress opportunities all over the place. The bad news is I'm probably going to have to get rid of most of the hay. Okay? So in that respect, well, actually, some of the older folks in the audience can remember, because we all did it, jumping from one level to the next level in the hay and so on, and having fights with hay and all that kind of stuff, tunneling underneath the hay to have tunnels and forts and so on. These kids won't be able to do that because I've got a fire hazard out there. Sorry about that. So, those of you who have had that kind of experience need to share that, write it down, or be docents and explain to the kids what they're missing. Because that I can't do in the fire code. Now, livestock. Livestock have health issues. 4-H groups and people like that have kids raising their heifers every year or raising their sheep and so on. We still have agricultural fairs. Okay? My home's in Harlington. There's an agricultural fair first weekend every October. It's been going on like that for, I don't know, 100 years, 150 years. The question now is going to be, how do you allow the kids, if that's in fact what you want to do, to raise sheep or to raise heifers or chickens or whatever it happens to be, and comply with health codes? I'm sure there's a compromise that's going to be available, but that's going to be a little touchy. Vegetable garden, or a victory garden, if you will. It's been a while since we've had victory gardens. But do you understand that the kids today don't know where their food comes from? It comes from the IGA, right? Or Stop and Shop. It never occurs to them that it comes out of the ground in somebody's backyard. And in fact, in Connecticut, it probably comes from Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Florida, California. We don't allow the kids an opportunity to experience that. And I apologize to the teachers in the room. Those little paper cups, the little Dixie cups where you have a little bean sprout sticking out of them, I'm sorry, that really doesn't illustrate what you're trying to do. My envision, I don't know if Nancy agrees with this, would be that you would have the kids go out in the spring, the appropriate time, show them how to go and put in a row of corn, and let them come back week after week after week and see how the corn grows. Show them how to start peas. Show them what radishes and carrots are all about. And let them participate. In fact, let them do the weeding that Jennifer doesn't want to do. But the point is, they need to know where their food comes from. They need to know how to grow it, what it's all about. And here's an opportunity to give them that experience. And there's one where I'm not worried about the health issues either, by the way. Okay? But the museum or the farm is whatever you all decide to make of it. And as you explore those options, you obviously have to keep in the back of your mind the fact that there are building codes and health codes and things like that. But in most cases, I think there are solutions that are fairly easy to those kinds of issues. Does that help you get a little better sense?
That was a great answer.
Nancy alluded to it when she was first talking. I have a bad habit. You ask me the time, I tell you how to make a watch. I'm sorry about that. That's the way it is.
Very thorough.
What else you got? Anybody else? Yeah.
Roy, do you think we could, I'm kind of sad that we don't have an easel, but what I kind of like to do is hold up those.
We can do that. It's hard.
What kind of struck me, and we can help you do that, what kind of struck me was the one that you had done of actually showing the alternative space and perhaps access.
Oh, in fact, some of these are going to be, because it's hard for you in the back to see, I'm going to suggest that we've got 2 sets of drawings today. I'm going to suggest that at some point we all come up and I can stay and walk you through these.
Yeah, you've just done so much work, and I think it's a shame not to.
Well, let me give you a sense of this. Where does this start? Okay. The drawings start with what we call FS drawings, Facility Survey, and they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So FS1 shows the floor plan of the barn as it exists today, okay, with all its warts and rotted wood and whatever. It's all down there. And we've tried to show, or at least let the names of the rooms give you a sense of what the rooms were used for and what their function was, okay? So this is a picture of the barn as it exists today. Okay? And then if we turn the pages, there we go. That's the framing. If you were to go in the barn and lie down on the floor and look up at the framing, that's what you'd see. Most people don't think of that, but barn framing changes in the United States from geographical areas. It changes over time. The early barns in New England, what we call English barns, and they tended to be 30 by 40 or about that. They were smaller barns. Almost always 3 bays, and they're based on an historic framing technique that goes back to medieval times from England, because most of the early settlers were English. And they brought this tradition to the United States. Okay? Now, the barns change. If you go up through New Hampshire, Vermont, and particularly on the coast of Maine, you'll see the connected barns. Big house, little house, back house, barn. Okay? That doesn't happen for another 150, 200 years. It's a change in the way, and there were big studies about how agricultural facilities ought to lay out. What was the most effective or efficient way of building buildings. By the turn of the century, we're into what really started as balloon framing out in Chicago after the fire. And balloon framing was available because at that time we could take and mill 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s that were 20 feet long, 25 feet long. So the vertical pieces would go all the way up to the roof. And that's essentially where this particular barn's history comes from. And I think it was 1910, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. And by the way, the barn is actually 2 buildings. If you go through there and look at the framing, you'll see the differences between the 2 time periods when the barn was built. Then we've got FS3 and FS4 are what are called exterior elevations. They're what you see when you walk around the barn and look at it. We do them in a flat projection because I've got a two-dimensional piece of paper. It's the only way I can show it, okay? But there are the 2 elevations of the barn, and if we flip the corner, or flip the page, there's 2 more elevations of the barn, okay? Now, this bottom elevation is what you would see of the barn if you came down the driveway and looked at the barn, okay? And if you look at it, you will see that this is a gable roof structure, this is a gambrel roof structure, and then this structure in front is a 3rd variation, again gambrel roof, but smaller in scale and obviously added to the barn at a later date. Because this piece is the most recent piece, and because it is an add-on that really isn't part of the original barn, that's where we would put the bathrooms and the kids' facilities and so on. Partly because it really isn't the oldest part of the barn. Okay? Now, let's go over 2 pages. There are appendages to the barn. So if you were to go down to the driveway and look to the left, you'll see a series of sheds that most recently were used for last year's crop of turkeys. Probably were used for chickens at one point or another, but they're appendages to the original barn, and so we picked those up and showed them what's going on there. Yeah, you guys want to do this all the time? This is the best eagle I've ever had. Now, we cut sections through the barn. Imagine that you are simply taking a knife and slicing down through the barn, and you're looking at the 2 halves so that you can see the framing in the vertical section of the walls. And if you look at that, this is 1 2x from there to there, which is almost 2 stories high. Remember I told you we used to be able to get 2x4s that were 20 feet long. We don't do that very much anymore. But you can see how large these spaces are. This is the section of the barn that's got all of the hay in it. It's an enormous, this is almost like, a small airplane hangar. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now, this is where the computer really helps the modern architect. I'm of divided opinion about computers for architecture, but in any case, In this drawing, you'll see that it's CNA number 1, Capital Needs Assessment 1. And what we've done is we've taken the floor plan and we've made notes to reflect the changes that we're proposing happen to the barn. Not to modernize it, just for maintenance purposes. Sooner or later, the barn's going to need a new roof. Sooner or later, it's going to need to be painted. There's a couple of windows that need a replacement right away. There's a couple of holes in the siding. Okay, so there's certain things you need to do now, certain things you can do in 5 years, certain things you can do in 10 years, and that's what that's all about. But so that you can illustrate where those repairs need to be done, we give you floor plans. Flip the page. The same roof framing plan is annotated to show where there's repairs to be made, and so on as you go through the building. We've annotated all of the exterior elevations so you know where the repairs are to be made. And then, so that you have an understanding of that, we also have a 3-ring binder where I tell you explain what the repairs are all about, what it's going to cost, what you have to do, that sort of thing. Okay? This one isn't quite done because Nancy owes me a history of the barn. And she has promised that she's going to get that for me.
My father gets a little long when
Now, we also took, and this was difficult because, well, we did it. We got a site plan of the property, and I'm sure you can't see this, but when you come up you can see it. This is the property right here. The barn is this little thing right here. So you can see that there's a lot of land back in here that could be used for part of the educational process. And in fact, there's even grades here that would allow us to do a small farm pond for ducks and geese and things like that. Hell, we might even get a trout in there, who knows. But we certainly could have a garden set aside for the kids. We certainly could get some livestock in there, petting zoo sort of thing. And somebody said, well, if we did that, where would we park? Well,
Sorry, Mom.
hold that one. Well, it's a good start. It's got to come down a little bit. Yeah. So we said, okay, this shaded area is the barn. I've got major traffic arteries here and here on Hartford Turnpike, and a minor road here. The easiest spot is to pop a parking lot in here with a large radius turnaround so I can bring a school bus in. This area now is easy to get in and out of, and it will park probably more people than we'll ever get in this site in any one time, particularly if you're bringing in a school bus with 30 kids and a couple of adults. I've only got one vehicle to park, not too tough. If there's an opportunity on a Saturday to bring in, have a class or something here, I can easily park 20 cars, and all of this land is still available. Okay? So then they asked me, well, how are we going to do the bathrooms and that kind of stuff? And you can't see this, but we got the plans for the bathrooms all set, ready to go. Okay? Any questions now? Boy, I tell you, did I put you all to sleep? How can that be?
I'm just awestruck.
Well, you're awestruck.
I have a question.
Yeah, who is it?
The grant covers just this?
Pardon me?
The grant that they got, is that?
The grant that they got covered, well, actually, it didn't cover that. You know, it was funny because I was testifying last week before the Appropriations Committee for the HIPTAG grants, and you need to understand that we have a process here in the state which I think is wonderful, but not everybody agrees with me. Most groups spread across the countryside who are interested in preservation projects of one sort or another. It's keeping an old church alive, keeping a barn alive, doing a house museum, whatever it happens to be, are volunteers, nonprofit, very little money. And when you're trying to maintain a building, there's some fairly large expenses that you're going to anticipate somewhere along the line. You've got to put a new roof on, you've got to do new plumbing, you've got to upgrade the fire code, that sort of thing. So the HIPTAG grants and the barn grants are supposed to help you get access to professional services. From the architect standpoint, every one of these I take, I lose money. It's where it is. What can I say? It's most of these grants, and they vary a little bit in amounts. I mean, sometimes, in fact, there's one grant, I don't know where these people came from, they got a grant for $160. I don't know how they're going to get an architect for $160, but I'm going to give them Bob's name.
And I'll meet with them once.
Most of the grants are $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. I mean, they rarely go much more than $5,000, $6,000. So an architect knows when he takes it on that he's doing basically a labor of love, because it doesn't even pay for my expenses, let alone show a profit. And that's one of the reasons Nancy said that there are a lot of architects who would not touch the barn grants, because the barn grants were for $1,500, $2,000, $3,000, and they're matching grants. So the client has to put up half the money. But another reason why these grants are particularly important is if you want to go after culture and tourism grants, which is the next level. Culture and tourism grants have a $75,000 matching or $200,000 max. Those grants, which have only been offered, I think, 2 years, and then the governor's put the kibosh on them recently, but those grants, for the first time in our history, allowed an organization, a nonprofit, to actually pay for repairs and only pay half of the cost of the repairs. That allows an awful lot of historic preservation to happen throughout the state that was not happening before. Okay? So if you're the ABC Historical Society and you've got a house that's built in the 17th century and you're trying to keep it up and you're doing the best you can just to pay the electric bill and the oil bill, how do you pay for the architect and the contractor and all the other work that has to go in at some point in time? And that was one of the reasons why we did the hip tag and the barn grants. Now, my suspicion is once the economy recovers, that money will be available again. I have suggested to anybody looking for that kind of money to put in an application. We are expecting that the applications will be acceptable this spring. We don't know when the lucky recipients are actually going to see money, but these are, just like everything else, essentially ways in which you can create jobs, ways in which you have shovel-ready projects, ways in which you can actually support the economy. The problem with them is they're a hard sell in terms of economic development when in the same Appropriations Committee hearing you've got 8 and 10-year-old little girls testifying, "Mommy can't feed us. Don't take away our programs. Take away those historic preservation programs. They're not important." You see the problem? So, yeah, Nancy's not going to pay me for about half the work we did. But that's all right, because I assumed that was going to happen. And in fact, that's the most common situation in all of these projects. It's why I only do 3 or 4 a year. Otherwise, I'd be bankrupt. I may be bankrupt anyhow, but that's another issue. Yeah, you had the question, I skipped over it.
Yes, how will the house, the strong house, fit into this plan?
Well, that's up to the Strong family. What I'm suggesting is that the house and immediate land around it to comply with current zoning be established. In other words, it be a subdivision, and the house be established as in one separate parcel, and whatever they deem is the rest of it is set aside. Now, I'm also, and I don't know the technical issue here, but the state of Connecticut allows the first cut in an undivided piece of land to be done as a freebie. In other words, you hire the attorney to help you, but you don't have to go through planning and zoning and all the other kinds of deals. And I think that this parcel has never been cut before. So if it's never been cut, the first cut is a freebie. After that, it's a problem. Still in all, when you make a cut, a subdivision, essentially, in one lot into 2 lots, you want to comply with the zoning as it currently exists. And I think in this case, it would be an easy thing to do. Yeah.
If you do that, then that allows the possibility of having a conservation easement on the land,
Yes.
and family could get some money maybe to
Yep.
help
Yep.
with the barn or whatever.
It's a little dicey, though, because you have to think about not only are there legal requirements and so on, but you really need to think about the welfare of the family. I mean, there are some folks who want to continue to live and use their own home. They've been there for 130 years. You don't just take it away. You need to be a little sensitive to their needs. Anything else? Wow. You're all sound asleep with your eyes open. It's impressive.
Well, there's another advantage too. Right now is not the right time, but because the state put money in the bucket for open space, and we pay maybe 50%. And I know in Vernon in the past, I've been a member of the Open Space Task Force, we had to wait for people to donate land, which didn't happen very often.
That's right.
And once the state put the money in the bucket, well, then that allowed the towns and communities to start planning for open space.
Yep.
And go, put the plan together, pick out priority parcels and so
Yep.
forth, and actively campaign. So that's been a big help in the community. I know Vernon has added a number of significant open space
Yep.
parcels since then. But at any rate, that's working in their advantage if the economy turns around and if they choose to go.
Well, I disagree a little bit. I think it's when the economy turns around. Because I do expect it to turn around.
Oh, did I say if?
You said if.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was born in the Depression. 1933.
But yeah, there.
Well, in that case, you can say it has turned around again.
Yeah. I've done pretty well.
Oh man, I'll tell you. Yeah, there's no question that farmland preservation is important. In fact, the farmland group were testifying in the same session that I was. It's a difficult situation.
And one other point, I think in my meeting with a lot of people in Vernon, and a lot of different activities, I'd like to have a nickel for every time I've heard people say, we've got to save that farm.
Mm.
So the undercurrent is there.
Yep.
It just takes a little publicity and some smart publicity to get these people active. The other thing is, we have a lot of seniors in this community now, getting condos and apartments, and they've got some money, most of them, and
Yep.
they've got time. They're retired.
Yep.
They had some until last August.
Pardon?
Yeah.
They had some until last August.
Yeah,
There was a day when Bob and I were planning to retire, right?
Yeah, the 401k took a dive, but there's hope, and I think these are good signs for the community.
I think it's good signs, but the other side that I'm seeing, and as we went from group to group to group, there are a whole variety of folks here in Vernon who see participation for a whole variety of reasons. It's an amazing kind of thing. It's rare that you come across a project that has touched so many lives in so many different ways. And quite frankly, I'm not so sure this is going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cost some money. You have to maintain, pay the electric bill, and so on. But as programs go, this one should be relatively easy. And I think there are a lot of, organizations that would love to be part of it because it supports. I mean, think of the VOAG school. My God, here's summer jobs for the kids. Think of the elementary school right next door. We could have people born in the 30s who would be the docents and explain to them what it was like, whether you're talking about the Depression or what it was like to have a family farm. Most of these farms disappeared somewhere in the 50s and 60s when it became not economical to have a dairy farm anymore. And that's really what's happened. You can also look across Vernon or Tolland or any of the towns out here and see how rapidly you're becoming subdivided into condos and single-family houses and so on. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when West Hartford wasn't subdivided, when Bloomfield and Avon and all of those towns first became subdivided and first became the place to live. Pardon me? Yeah. So you're in a wonderful moment in time. You've got an opportunity here that will probably never come again. And the question is, are you willing, are you capable, do you want to participate in making this thing a reality here in Vernon? And really, you need to talk with the Strongs. Nancy, you want to add anything?
No. My father probably will.
Okay.
Well, the strong thing, but I think they are all in agreement. They want to see the thing saved. And I certainly don't want it to look like the Roosevelt Mill.
Yeah.
That's what I'm afraid of. And if you're going to do that, I'm going to see it teared down and see it that way. There's some things that wants to be taken care of right away. we will see to that. And I would like to present we can't have 100, I don't know how many plans, always the plans from each individual, so you've got to have some committee that's going to be in charge of it. I don't want to see these plans, the amount of time they've developed these plans and see them put on and rather dust. And I don't think you want to see that either. And we don't want to see houses there. And they have this sign over next on the other corner where the land is for sale. I think they're going to put 13 condos there or something. And the price of that land is $290,000 for 3 acres. My goodness, what a price for land. And I'm sure probably they won't get that for it. But anyway, I don't want to see houses in back of my house. And my wife and I both want to be there. My first objection is to take care of my wife. And after that, I'm not going to take it with me this far. And I hope that I've got enough to see me through. And my life expectancy is not very great, and I want to see this taken care of soon. And I'm sure my wife, she gives me trouble on this. She never wants to see something happen today before it's got to go, and I want to do it right away. And I'll like to offer an example of an organization in our town. After I got rid of the dairy barn, I spent 15 years as superintendent of the cemeteries in town. And they had a committee there that was elected, that was my boss. And they had the oversight. They also, now, I'm sure that you all know Henry Park, and there used to be the Henry Building, and now it's the tax collector's office, not there. And Henry left that building to the town. And the interest of that money was to go to the Grove Hill Cemetery or the expansion of it. And I think that's a good example of what might happen here. That if you had a committee that was appointed by the town and that had the oversight of it, we can't have everybody and his brother going in there and raising animals and everything. Somebody's got to be in charge, and you've got to leave the money to them. You can buy this land, I'm sure, pretty cheap, but we want to see it used, and we don't want to see buildings there. Both of us want to die there. And I'm sure Nancy does not want to get out of there either. And I want to go with her, and I've got to. You can see that I'm not very good shape now, and I can't do anything. But we will take care of the buildings, that barn, so it isn't going to fall till such time as you can get organized. It's going to take you a long time to set up this now. To go and get any money out of the town, it's going to be hard. We never had much trouble from I never did have much trouble from the Grove Hill Cemetery Committee. They were pretty generous with us, and they were more generous now than they were when I left. Being an old Yankee like myself, brought up as a very, very conservative man. And if you could do something like that, I don't know whether you could call large animals there, but certainly you could do different things and set up plantings in there. If you go and see the Victory Gardens on Sunday afternoons and see parks, and you'll see several, they have several parks on that people they show, something like that where people, but what we want to see is where future generations can enjoy it. That's all we ask. And thank you, and I think I would like to see, maybe somebody's got to be in charge of this. And if you can get together and get a committee to look after this and get a, they gotta go to all these boards and get approval. Oh, my goodness.
You should know, Norm, you've been on all of them.
If we develop it, and I know, last I heard from the lawyers, that there's 15 boards and commissions you had to go to before you could turn a shovel full of dirt over. And I think that's what you've got to do to get any money out of the town. And the town has been after us, I remember two different times now. They like, one of them wants to build a road across this from the elementary school to Peterson Road. I don't know, I drove bus for a year and a half, and I had to unload bus right in the playground. That's not very, you don't know whether kids, it's all under getting a ball under your bus or not. And it's not very good planning at Puckaman and that elementary school where you have a playground and you're unloading buses. That's all I have to say, and I wish you good luck. And we will cooperate with you.
Timeline goes, everything I've read says it takes 10 years to get everything in place, you know, all things. So this is kind of the timeline. But this is the first step, and we'll be calling on a lot of you, you know, for, you know, proposals, directions, suggestions, anything on the line. I want to thank you all for coming. We have the barn open, so if anybody wants to go over to the barn and take a look around, feel free. And we do have refreshments in the back, so help yourself. And
I'll stay here for a while if you want to go through the drawing, take a look at that, so you understand what's going on there.
And if you had an email, if everybody signed in, we'll keep you all posted for people that are here. You know, we send out email updates from. I'm going to get my 13-year-old brand nephew to make a website, so you can all dial in. Takes the young ones to do this. Okay, Jennifer, you got anything else to say?
No, I just thank everyone for coming.
How about Morgan?
Yeah, for the long twist of the arm, I'm going to be raising turkeys and hay for next year, so.
So that'll give us a year of breathing time, organization too, so.
Yeah, the need is.
But it is important. It's the momentum builds to keep it going. You know, these things, these projects sometimes die of inertia. And if you really want this is an opportunity that they coming back. So, you know, talk among yourselves, talk to the town officials. Nancy can tell you some of the other organizations that we've spoken with already. This is a wonderful opportunity, and it's a wonderful gift, really, that the family is providing for Vernon. It'd be a shame if this does not go anywhere. You really need to get organized and get on with it. It's also one of those things that a lot of these projects have a strange life to them. They start out slow, and as they gain momentum, they accelerate. You don't have to wait 10 years. A lot of the work has already been done, and in 2 or 3 years, easy. You could have kids in there, you could have organizations going and so on. Everyone that we have been to, including the town officials, have been supportive. We have not had one naysayer. That is a miracle.
In a state where we don't want a prison in our town, we don't want supportive housing in our town, we don't want elderly housing in our town, we don't want, you name it. And I was the architect for Rite Aid. Man, I tell you, they grilled us on that one. But here's one where not a single person has been a naysayer. That is unusual. Well, in any case, see the barn. It's worth taking a trip over there. I'll stay here a little bit with some drawings.